Have you ever been part of a protest movement? I mean, really part of it. Not just sitting watching it on television and making your comments about the crowd you're watching, but actually being out there among the thousands or tens of thousands, shouting and demanding what? Change, of course. Protest movements are always demanding change. Sometimes they can turn violent, but normally they're hoping for some negotiation. But even just watching a protest movement, as a spectator, one can feel the surge of energy, even the excitement. Being part of this enormous crowd, you feel power has been released within oneself. Have you ever been part of a revolution? A revolution is not just demanding change, a little change in the structure of politics, of the government, or economics. Revolution wants a total overthrow of the existing social order. We can think back perhaps to many major revolutions there have been in the history of our human family and different civilizations. You may think of some of them in Europe or in America or in the Middle East or Asia in the last 100 years or so. Well, we can say I've never been part of any revolutionary movement, really, even though I probably agreed or disagreed with their goals and their decisions. But one revolution which we are all part of at the moment, because it's affecting the whole human family, has been called the DNA revolution. It is now, it is for all of us, and so it is really important that we all give time to reflect over the probable outcome, the possible outcomes of this revolution, because it's raising critical questions for humanity and for me on my space-time journey and on my inner, deeper spiritual journey. Some of you who are joining in these reflections with us probably are trained in the theory of genetics or very well versed, understanding completely the genetic, the DNA revolution. The rest of us are not. We're possibly just at the kindergarten stage of understanding. And this is no attempt to train us in genetic theory and practice. But the minimum amount of understanding is required of all of us. All of us, as we said last time, who are reflecting together on this journey, who are aware of the crises of our times and the responsibility we all have to take time to reflect, to share our reflections, to talk it out with other people. So, let's have a quick revision for us all as to how all this began. At the beginning of the millennium, from the years about 2001 to 2003, we had the human genome was completed, the mapping of our human genome. Okay. After that, of course, there were years of experimentation where scientists were trying to see how much more they could find out about the genome. And a breakthrough came in the most unexpected way for most of us in 2007. It came with a group of scientists who were doing some research on food, working on why the taste in an ordinary cup of yogurt was changing according to the changes in the bacteria. Breakfast food. They were not expecting it, but what they did discover, with something that we have represented just by the initial letters over here on the board, it was that they discovered clusters which regularly interspersed were short messages, palindromic, that means you can read them both ways, repeating. Doesn't make sense to most of us at the kindergarten stage, but those letters now we will remember. So they discovered it was an enormous breakthrough in genetic theory, in how we could possibly begin to edit and change the human genome. But they really didn't know how to use what they had discovered until in the year 2012, two women researchers, one in America and one then in Sweden, decided to share their research. And in the sharing, they discovered a particular enzyme within cells, which again we have its initial letters here, CAS9, could be used in the most unexpected way, like a pair of molecular scissors, where they could cut out a particular part of the genome, the genetic sequence. So if they could focus on what exactly it was in the genetic pattern that was, for example, carrying a hereditary disease, they now had the technology to cut that out. They had to program CRISPR, the first one, CRISPR, to be able to target specific sections of the DNA, and they discovered that, and it was done fairly recently, by matching the RNA with the DNA, where they could then target a very particular gene that they wanted. And then they had the technology, very simple technologies. They describe it like scissors, where you could just snip it out. It all sounds so simple. This technology is now only 4 years old, as we're talking, but its use is already vast and varied. And it's raising crucial ethical questions. Yes, of course we can do it, but should we do it? Are there any checks and balances? That scientists can now reprogram the cells of plants, insects, human embryos, in fact, any DNA on planet Earth. DNA, the code of life. Huge questions. So, what has been done so far? Well, HIV, which we're all familiar with, the virus has been successfully cut out from human cells, but in the laboratory in the States, in Philadelphia in the States. It's also been cut out from animals who have been infected with HIV. In medical treatment, well, people with forms of cancer, it has been done that they can remove the blood cells, revive the person's cancer-fighting cells, then return the blood that is now free of the disease using this method. So far, we might say, the use of the research and the technique is good. It's encouraging human life, it's prolonging it, improving its quality, and so on. But this picture reminds us of something else. No, this is not a designer baby, but she is a little girl born in the States months ago. Her name is Quelle. Probably pronounced slightly differently, but we're familiar with the word. Why is she interesting? Because like other babies in that particular institute, hospital, in the United States, she is tested, and the hope is that they will be able to cut out an inherited disease that makes her susceptible to the use of drugs, and also would give doctors some idea of what medication could be used safely, wisely, for her in the future. But even now we can begin to see the ethical problem arising. If we have control over the code of life in editing the human DNA, what uses could we put it to? The debate, of course, has already started by the scientists who have been leaders in this field of research. From about 2015 onwards, they were claiming in their discussions that the technique is immature. It's not fully tested. There are dangers which perhaps we cannot foresee. The advice is go slow. But as one of the two women who first made a breakthrough in this research said herself, yes, we need to go slow, but it's already here, and we can't pull it back. This is always the question, isn't it, in scientific discoveries? Once we know, we can't say, no, now we don't use that. We will not use our knowledge. We just have people who will want to go on developing it. The main issue is the use to modify human reproductive cells. The only thing the scientists can say is important if to make us go slow is to provide some checks and balances, somebody who can oversee what research is going on, to provide appropriate guidelines. And I think at this point each one of us needs to go and see what is actually happening in my own country where this is concerned. Because the responses in some of the main countries that they had gone furthest in the research so far, is not totally what we would hope for. For example, in the United States, at the moment, there are federal laws which oversee human embryo research. Sounds good. But those federal laws and the overseeing of the research is only done when the research is actually being funded by the government. Now, if a millionaire decides, or an entrepreneur decides it is worth funding this research, there are no checks. There is nobody overseeing. We know all too well that when the questions of money and economic advantage comes into scientific research, we have a problem. And here, most certainly, it seems we have. China, for example, as far as we can see, is going ahead with the research. And one researcher from China has already got the patent for the use of this technique on human DNA. So that is the overview, as those of us perhaps at the grassroots can see it and can understand it the first time around. It has obviously left us with questions. Are questions to go? If, by the way, while you were listening to the research as it is at the moment, and even seeing that picture of this newly born child, did you find yourself feeling a little scared by it all? Find it all just a little frightening? You know, we have to ask ourselves, and this is number one, I'm frightened because probably I didn't really realize what life-threatening, in one sense, or life-enhancing research was going on around me. So the first question is this: how awake am I? How aware am I of the progress of life-changing research? Do I listen to it when it comes on television or radio? Do I read about it when it's there in the newspapers and magazines? Do I look for it? And when I've found it and I've read it, do I really reflect on it? And then will I talk it out with others? Some of you will say yes to some of this. Some of you may find yourself having to say no. Now that is the first thing to change in the month ahead. That's the first of our questions to go. Until recently, if you'd asked a small child, especially from a Christian background, who made you? The answer might very well be, God made me. No problem. What if he says, well, partly my parents and the other was DNA editing? Do I see all this powerful technology as the God who is the source of all life, working through human means in our world, working through human persons? And if so, with or without their free will? That's question number 2. This is a simple one. It comes straight out of the last one. Simple to say. How far am I in control of my psychophysical space-time journey? How far is God in control of my journey through space-time with the body psyche? Number 4. If my baby daughter or grandson had inherited a serious disability or disease, such as, say, schizophrenia, how would I feel about the use of this technique on him or her? They are very important questions. Their answers have far-reaching effects on myself, on my attitudes, on my choices. And quite honestly, I think all of us would say a little bit, it would make me realize how afraid I can be, how I just want to run away from it and say, it isn't happening, rather than be able to say, This is most wonderful knowledge. Knowledge and power working through human beings at this age in a way that has never been known before, which even at the beginning of this millennium, only 16 years ago, we would never have ever dreamt would happen. And here we are. And how far will it take us from this point today? The reflection time is very important. I hope you have programmed it in as best you can to your day. 10 minutes in the morning or in the evening, or sitting in the car in the parking lot before you begin the day's work, or somewhere before you actually reach home, between the day's work, the professional tensions and demands, and reaching the family and the family life with its own tensions and demands, somewhere finding a small space, a little seclusion, even in the parking lot. Have I really got that going in my life? And perhaps for this particular time of reflecting on these questions of the DNA revolution and how I am involved in it, it would help to just keep repeating that phrase from Psalm 138 or 39. I thank you for the wonder of my being. I thank you. I am so marvelously made. It's a simple sentence. It's extremely powerful. If you just sit in the silent space of your car in the parking lot or wherever, get out and find a quiet bench to sit on. But in that, just to close your eyes and breathe that sentence. I thank you for the wonder of my being. I thank you that I am so marvelously made.